When students come to you and say, is it okay if I read this book? And you look and you realize that a child's already read that book. Sometimes we have the tendency to say, oh, sweetheart, you've already read that book. Why don't we try a different book, a new book? And the reality is, when a kid wants to go into a text for a certain reason, we need to honor that. Think of it this way. When you're driving home from work and on the radio comes your favorite song, do you actually say, oh my gosh, it's my favorite song, and then reach over and change the station because you've already heard it that day? No, actually what you want to do is enjoy that song again and again and again. The same thing when a 2-year-old hands you the same picture book at night again and again and again. For some reason, that child wants to go back into that text. Just because kids are older, when they want to go back to that favorite text, we need to honor that. What's happening there when kids revisit a text is they're developing fluency with comprehension. We think about fluency with words and we think about fluency with reading rate, but what we want to focus on is fluency with comprehension. And that happens when I get to sort of meet the same plot over and over again, see the same characters over and over again, try to figure out how the author made that one particular text work over and over again. So when your kids come to you and say, can we read this again? Or can I read this? I read it last year and I want to read it this year for whatever project they're doing. Instead of saying, well, let's look at a different text, you might remember that revisiting that same text has real educational reasons, and say to them, yeah, go ahead and reread.
And it also has its parallels in adult reading too. Although we may not go back to the same novel that we read last week, there are a great many of us who want to re-enter the same imaginary world we entered last week. Thus we read all of the Lee Child books, or we read all of the John Grisham books.
Or all the Jodi Picoult books.
Who's she?
Yeah, I read all the Jodi Picoult books.
Anyway,
yes.
The idea
again
is
and again.
that we grow comfortable in that world and we like it, we understand it, we know what sorts of things happen. And we may not know what in particular is going to happen in this book, but we know generally what happens and we want to re-enter that experience.
So the idea of revisiting the same author is an extension of revisiting the same text. And what you're helping kids do is become more independent, fluent readers, even if it looks like they kind of have stepped back by going back to the same text. It's always a good idea to let kids reread.